Parents of Reddit, what is the scariest thing your child said to you or to someone? U/similar dream 9731 responded. Will the man in the attic come with us when we move? U/straight outta Krajan replied to this with, my aunt-in-law grew up in a 3-flat in the 50s. Her family owned the entire building and the apartments were connected by a stairway in the back. They never locked their back doors and the top apartment at the time was empty. She told us that when she was little, a man from the 3rd floor would sometimes come down to her room, which she shared with her sister, and talk with them. He also sometimes read them stories. She told her parents, but they never believed her, thinking she was young and making it up. Months later they went up to the 3rd floor apartment and there was evidence that someone had been living there. She said he was a very nice man and would often sit in their room and talk with them at night. ETA, it was actually the attic, not a 3rd floor apartment, the guy was living in. U/it's fish 20 responded. My 2-year-old never stops talking and has said some really weird and freaky things lately. The creepiest one was when we were putting her to bed and she said goodnight to the closet man, and when we asked her who she meant she told us it was the little man that lived in the small access hatch she has in the back of her closet. Scary thing is she has never seen that hatch open, and I'm pretty sure she has never seen it before because there has been a big storage tote in front of it since before she was born. You bet I checked the hatch the next morning when she was downstairs and found nothing but dust and spiderwebs in there, so that made me a bit happier. U/deleted responded. I was driving my son to daycare. It was just the 2 of us as I already dropped my other son off at school. My then 3-year-old said to me, Mommy, I love you more than my first mommy. I said, your first mommy? He said, yes, my first mommy in California. We live in the US, but about as far from California as you can get. I said, you lived in California? He said, yes, up until Jason stabbed me and then I came to you. I said, who is Jason? And then he just started talking about something else. I tried to get more info from him on it, but he never talked about it again. So weird, and I can't imagine where he would have gotten the fodder for it to make it up in his imagination. The only Jason we knew was someone he saw only occasionally, and my son liked him. There was no fear or bad feelings associated with him. The only media he saw at that point was various kids' TV. Still kind of freaks me out almost 10 years later. U/Scary Susie responded. A few months after my mom passed, my daughter was sitting in the TV room. She looked down the hall and I could tell something caught her eye. She got up and said Yaya is in her room, and proceeded to go in my mom's room and shut the door. I could hear my daughter talking and laughing through the door. I was equal parts scared of and hoping to hear my mom too, but I didn't. U/Hank Lee replied to this with, at my mother's funeral my 3-year-old insisted that she was standing in the side doorway. The door was closed and there was no way he could have thought someone else was standing there, and when I explained that her body was in the casket he got very worked up and irate with me. To be honest, if anyone was going to turn up to their own funeral it would have been my mum, so don't disbelieve him. U/JKW 1988 responded. My kids are autistic and very minimally speaking. My oldest has a lot of echolalia, repeating words. He does use an AAC device and can communicate with it. The scariest thing he said happened one Wednesday when he came home from school. He always liked it when Elle asked about classmates, paraprofessionals, etc. He'd giggle, smile, flap his hands, repeat their names back. On this day, I mentioned his teacher. His face darkened and he looked down at his lap as he very softly repeated her name. He seemed scared. I thought it was odd. I didn't like this teacher. I thought she was unprofessional and didn't know WTF she was doing. It bothered me that night. I did ask myself, did something happen? But denial was heavy and I thought, no, that wouldn't happen to him. I found out the next day she had physically assaulted my son and a few other kids shortly before the school day ended. So when he came home scared, it had happened about 2 hours prior. So, that was the scariest. I learned a very big lesson about looking for warning signs. Tone is everything. U/Black Widowwink responded. I was at a silent auction and there was a really creepy 100-year-old doll that I bid on as a joke. Turns out nobody else wanted it, so I won. My wife and I are talking the whole time about how creepy this doll was. As I stood in line to pay for it, my daughter asked to hold the doll, so I gave it to her. A few older ladies starting coming up to her and saying things like that doll is older than I am, and you're so lucky to have such a pretty doll. I guess because my daughter had been listening to us talking, she would respond with things like, did you hear that? She's laughing at you. I tried so hard not to laugh at the look on their faces, but the last one got me. My daughter put her ear down to the doll's face and with a very serious look said to a lady, I think the doll just said the F word. You/Bayabu responded. Not my kid, but my friends. They were across the country visiting family and out for a drive. Her 4-year-old points down an old overgrown road, more of a dirt track, and said that was where I used to go to school. She told him he didn't even go to school yet. Mentioned it to her brother when they drove by another day, and he told her that well down that track used to be a schoolhouse in the 1800s. Same kid was on a walk with mom in our town around a fairly wooded pond. He asked his mom if they could go another way. She said there was only path and asked why. He responded, I don't like that man hanging from the tree. Needless to say, they moved away from that area very quickly. You/Downbronx responded. My little brother would say creepy stuff. The worst though is one night he threw a fit to go to my mom's friend's house to see the baby. My mom told him no, we're going over there this weekend. Little brother looked at her and told her if we don't see the baby today then we'll never see him again. What mom didn't know is as this conversation is happening her friend's older son was playing with a lighter and set the house on fire. Friend wasn't able to get to the baby's room to save him and she had to be rescued with severe burns and damaged lungs. The older son was a dick then as a child and became an even bigger pile of shit as an adult. You/Nikki Boom Boom 23 responded. I took my 3-year-old on a flight this last summer. He's been on an airplane several times in his short life so it's not like it was something new to him. But as we took off he was explaining the process to me. Mama, we go fast and then up and then. He stared straight ahead and put his hand on his chest and continued with we fall down and explosion noises and there's fire all over. And he sat for a solid beat just staring straight ahead with that little hand over his heart and his eyes far away before becoming his normal toddler self again. He hasn't mentioned anything like it since. You/Meetamg responded. My kid and my niece have such an uncanny connection. They live in different countries. When my kiddo was 4/5 we went for pizza and this little random spot they had seen us drive past, whatever seemed cool. Kiddo hits me with the me and niece always wanted to open up a pizza shop here when I was in a wheelchair and niece was my little girl. We lived across the street in that house. Okay, what a cute little story, they're a kid whatever. Time passes and we are parked and see a man having a hard time getting his wheelchair out of his van. BC the parking space wasn't quite wide enough. We should help him. I remember how annoying that used to be for me and niece instantly took me back to our pizza afternoon. Yes, we helped the gentleman. We chat a bit about the previous life and kiddo has things to say that are repeated. Time passes again and we are visiting my niece. They haven't physically seen each other in months, but on video chat and through photos. My niece learning to talk now and get her words out clearly keeps calling my kid Nana, mother's father, and she gets so excited whenever my kid gets up and walks. I tell my Sil about what my kiddos told me and she tells me that my niece always wants to go up to elderly Paul she sees in wheelchairs trying to push them, help them with their mobility. My niece and my kiddo get ready for bed while we stay with them and they insist of sleeping together. BC they missed each other. BC my kiddo said it's been so many lives. Not creepy per se but just always so interesting. You/Dishin responded. My daughter is 3 and is working on performing her own nighttime routines. We asked her how she gets ready for bath time and gave her her stuffed bunny to demonstrate on. She takes the bunny and begins explaining the steps of her routine, mimicking the actions on the doll. First you take off your pants. Asterisk she wiggles rabbit's legs asterisk. Then you take off your shirt, she wiggles rabbit's arms. Then you take off your underwear, wiggles the legs again. Then you take off your hands, she pulls on rabbit's arm in a plucking motion. Then you take off your arms. Rabbit's arms are wrenched immediately. Then you take off your legs, your hair, your tummy, your face. She gleefully laughs as she mimes ripping each part off of rabbit. All done, she looks up at us with a smile. We are aghast. You/deleted responded. I nannied my niece when she was about 1.5 years old. For like a few days in a row, LD go to put her down for a midday nap, she'd start waving to the corner of the room behind the door and saying man, man. I could hear her on the monitor saying it when LD closed the door too. She couldn't speak well enough to explain further so L tried to figure out what she was seeing, checked the door, made sure the monitor wasn't doing some funny etc. It was creeping me out and she seemed so distracted by it, so finally on the 3rd day I decided to close the door and sit in there with her to see what was going on. Turns out at that time of day, the sun was in a position to shine through a crack of the curtains and a hanging mobile in just the right way to create what looked like a hand shape on the wall. She was trying to say hand not man. Boy was I relieved. I adjusted the curtains and all was well lol. You/Timechuck responded. When my boys were smaller, they had an imaginary friend called Trick-or-Trick, Trick or Trick maybe, never was clear, but my son was telling me about him shortly after we had moved from the old house, Stuff happened there, noises and shit like that. So he's telling me that Trick-or-Trick is really tall, he comes from the old house. Sometimes he takes things that don't belong to him. I asked H, my younger son, if there's anything else, and he said he doesn't like you at all, Daddy. I ask him why and H start looking nervous. J, older son, about 6 at the time, leaves the room. H just stands there and doesn't say anything. I ask him if Trick-or-Trick is here now. H looked a bit to his left, then directly into my eyes and says he said to say no. U/Wingardium Leviosa blah responded. My toddler, 2.5 years old, recently shared a ghost sighting with us. She has done it before but usually not so confidently. We try very hard not to show her how interested we are because we don't want her to start making things up, more than she already is, hopefully speaking, lol. Anyway, she stopped mid-play with my husband and I the other day and completely had a mood shift. We had been all making Play-Doh ice cream and laughing and talking. She stopped, looked to her right, and set down her ice cream to wave. She said, "Hi ghost," pleasantly and just smiled. Was suddenly much more quiet and observant, more calm, not as lost in the playing. Similar to how we'd be if someone passed by us in public or interrupted for a brief moment. You're still in a good mood, but not going to rudely keep playing instead of saying hello. If that makes sense. It was an open spot of floor above our basement stairs. She was looking slightly up, so it'd have been about the height of an older kid, or taller and standing on the stairs. We both slowed what we were doing and made eye contact and said, "There's a ghost." And she says, "Yes, right there." All smiles. We nonchalantly went, "Oh, there you are. Hey ghost." She didn't even incorporate it into her game or make any more of a deal about it. She just started up her ice cream making again and let it be. I think the scary part comes from not knowing what's going on in her little mind, not even the ghost part. Because clearly, it's quite peaceful. U/Substantial Oven 6169 responded. When my little brother was 2 to 3 he would talk about how he missed his wife and children. I think he had names for all of them too. He would say that he was a general in the war. My parents would play off these comments and didn't think much of them. Until one day we drove by one of the oldest houses in town, pre-revolution, and he pointed and said something along the lines of, "There's my old house. Why did they cut down the apple trees I planted for Mary Beth?" He once also told my entire family at the dinner table that he was shot by a man in a red coat in the snow. He was staring at a pile of ketchup on his white dinner plate when he said that. He has no recollection of any of ththese comments as an adult now, lol. I know 30-year-olds who can't tell the difference between what century homes were built in, let alone a toddler. U/Pink Mongoose responded. My little friend went through a phase of telling dark stories when she was 3 to 4. She was also really into playing games about taking her toys to the doctor. We were playing and she said this toy is really scared of the doctor and I said why? Doctors are there to help us. Or something like that. She said he is scared because this is the bad nurse. She gives him medicine so he can't move or scream and then cuts him open and takes his insides out. I was just like, yeah, that's a good reason to be scared. We have no idea where she came up with that stuff. She's 6 now and all her stories are about fairies and princesses. I kind of miss her dark stories, they were more creative, even though some kept me up at night. U/this_ain't_my_real_ac responded. My 4-year-old son had a habit of announcing when he had to use the bathroom. He would say, "I gotta go potty." One time he makes his business known and heads off toward the bathroom. He returns seconds later and says there's already someone in the bathroom. Now I do know for a fact that it's just the 2 of us home, so the hair stands up on my neck. I ask him, "What do you mean?" He repeats, "There's already someone in the bathroom." Now I'm thinking, is it someone I see, dead people, or someone in a hockey goalie mask? So I'll grab the biggest knife from my knife block and tell him to stay here. I walk to the bathroom, take a wide angle to see in, nobody. Slowly and quietly walk toward the shower and pull back the curtain. Nothing. By now my son has walked around the corner and I ask him, "Where did you see the person?" He points to an unflushed toilet and says, "See, someone's already here." His big brother didn't flush the toilet. U/Akadbakadbambo 80 responded. It about my cousin's sister. She is much older than me, she was a toddler around 3 to 4 when this event happened. My family lived in a big country mansion in North India in a semi-rural town. My eldest uncle and his wife lived on the top floor. Unfortunately, this aunt of mine slipped in the stairs and died. She was pregnant at that time. This cousin in question was the daughter of my uncle's sister and she was quite close with this aunt who passed away. After her death, The room was kept locked as family was in mourning. One fine day, this young kid disappears. It was a big house, though only 7 to 8 of the 40-odd rooms we lived in. So it took a lot of time for a grieving and now panicked family to search for this kid. Suddenly, the bereaved husband had a brainwave to look in his and his now deceased wife's room. And the child was peacefully sleeping, doors unlocked. On waking up, she said I was here all the time, playing with Mummy. She told me stories and also introduced me to her baby. Mummy is the wife of your mother's brother, and the lady was pregnant when she fell and died. Her father took a transfer from Rajasthan to Gujarat and her family stopped visiting our family mansion for years afterwards. This is true because my mother had just got married into the family and witnessed it herself. U/SCARIEST squad responded. I'm not a parent, but I was definitely the kid in this situation. I was about 6 or 7 years old. I had a bedroom to myself. I can still remember it so clearly, like it happened yesterday, and I'm 20 now. For months I wasn't able to sleep at night, because there was a woman in my bedroom in the corner opposite to my bed. This woman was white, elderly, had short hair like a bob and a very old style dress. She looked like a librarian ghost from a typical horror movie. Every time I closed my eyes, she would get closer to my bed, even when I blinked. This led me to constantly have my eyes open every night for months, constant panic attacks and breakdowns over it. I didn't tell my parents for months, and when I finally did, my dad stepped up and told me he would never let someone hurt or scare me, and he proceeded to air punch the corner where I was seeing the woman. He beat the shit out of the air in the corner for like 2 minutes straight, swearing and yelling at it. I never had another issue with the woman. She disappeared for good. U/Overland Traveler responded. I was a Waldorf kindergarten teacher for a few years, and we would make lunch every day in our class. So it was me, my assistant and 12 kids or so. Eating our homemade bread and soup, one of the kids says really nonchalantly, Ms. Overland Traveler was supposed to be my mommy, but then she decided not to have babies, so I found a new mommy and continued to eat his soup. He was right, I chose not to have kids, but still, he was about 5 at the time, so 5 years prior my husband and I decided to not have children. My assistant just had huge eyes, staring at me like WTF. And I just smiled and said I was glad he found another good mommy. He nodded and said, she's nice, and so are you. Very cool, loved that. U/Moths responded. When I was 18, Elle lived with my friend and her 3-year-old daughter. I was staying in a basement room that had a little door to access the crawl space under the stairs, but I kept a bookshelf against it because I just felt weird about the door. One night I was just sitting in bed and the 3-year-old come in and just looked at the door and said, a grandma's angry, wants to come out of there, and points at the door. I was freaked out but didn't want her to see that, so Elle asked her to tell me how she knew that. The grandma comes to see me in my room sometimes. She has mean black eyes and is scary. I asked her if she could draw the scary grandma for me, and she ended up drawing a human shape with grey curly hair, a blue dress with pink flowers and black drippy eyes. I ended up moving my dresser in front of the door immediately after that, as I had the only access to the crawl space in my room. That freaked me out. She mentioned on and off a few more times about seeing scary grandma, and I just kept an eye on the door. To make the 3-year-old feel better about it, I went to the dollar store and bought a cheap little spray bottle and made a fancy label on the computer for it saying, Scary Grandma Repellent, and filled it with water. At bedtime we would go and spray the repellent around the room. I started asking her in the mornings if Scary Grandma was still coming to see her at night, and she told me Scary Grandma still comes sometimes. So Elle don't think it was an imaginary friend, something she made up. At least I know my intuition about the door making me feel weird was validated. U/Knock Me Orlobes responded. Not my kid, but when my son was in kindergarten there was one kid, Jerry, not his real name, who was constantly bullying my son and others. I helped out in the classroom a lot and I was always asking Jerry to stop doing this, stop doing that. At the class winter holiday party that year, I was helping kids make ornaments to take home to their parents. When it was Jerry's group's turn, he pointed the blunt-nosed scissors at me and said, I'm going to cut your eyes out. I told him, no, we don't do stuff like that. I made sure my son wasn't in Jerry's class for 1st grade and the district transferred us to a different school for 2nd through 5th. They redrew the attendance zones and we were no longer in the zone for the same school Jerry was in. About the time my son was in 3rd grade, I heard Jerry's parents had to pay for a "this is why we don't do this shit" lecture for the entire school. Why? Because Jerry had gone into the bathroom near the art classroom, taken damp paper towels, shoved them into the electric hand dryer and held down the button in hopes that the paper towels would either short out the dryer or catch on fire. A couple years after that, so around 5th/6th grade, Heard Jerry's parents had him transferred to a local charter school that was known as the place you sent your kid if you wanted them to end up in juvie, because it was the one school that would take kids after they'd been kicked out of the regular schools for bad behavior, drugs, etc. Last thing I heard was Jerry was sent into the military after HS graduation to try and straighten his ass out. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, you might enjoy the rest of my content. Check it out.